Senator Hassan is recognized.
Thank you. I want to thank the chair and our ranking member and our substitute chair right now for this hearing. And Comptroller General Dodaro, thank you and your dedicated team for your testimony today. I also want to congratulate the Government Accountability Office as it celebrates 100 years of service. I'm particularly grateful as chair of the Emerging Threats and Spending Oversight Subcommittee for GAO's work to help the federal government save taxpayer dollars and operate more effectively. And to that end, Senator Paul and I plan to circulate a bipartisan resolution to recognize GAO's 100th anniversary, and I'll invite all of our colleagues to join. My first question to you today, Comptroller General, is about IT acquisitions and operations. The pandemic has put into sharp relief something many of us already knew, namely that aging federal IT systems lag behind those of private organizations in terms of their ability to innovate and adapt to the ever-changing technological landscape. Last summer, I wrote to the 10 agencies with the most critical legacy IT systems identified by a 2019 GAO report, and I asked them for their plans to move away from legacy IT. Yet several months later, as the high-risk list notes, 3 out of those 10 agencies have yet to produce plans to reduce reliance on these outdated systems that are costly, open federal systems up to security vulnerabilities, and do not meet the level of customer service that Americans expect in the 21st century. So why is it important, Mr. Comptroller General, for all agencies to have a plan in place to transition away from legacy IT systems?
This is critical to improving services to the public, number one. And particularly during a pandemic, when you are limited to virtual communications. I mean, the disability area claims have been backlogged, both at the VA, Social Security Administration, because things weren't set up to do things smoothly virtually and to conduct transactions and conduct business. And government's used to, or citizens are used to dealing with the private sector and getting more regular, better service from them. So to be more responsive, to be more efficient, to have greater transparency, but also these security issues cannot be overestimated. These legacy systems are a millstone around the neck of federal agencies and the efforts of the federal government to secure its systems. They were designed 40 and 50 years ago with nowhere near the concern about cybersecurity that we have today, and they desperately need to be changed, and you're not nimble when things occur and things happen. I thought the Congress, in setting up the Technology Modernization Fund, which was a good move, and I would encourage Congress to look at funding that properly, because things could be rapidly approved there, and they could have some efforts underway to be able to begin to modernize these systems. But it's also why you need to have authorities to the chief information officers in the agencies. You know, I first worked with this committee in the 1990s to pass the Clinger-Cohen Act, which first established chief information officers in the government, and they were supposed to have a seat at the table and really control this, and it didn't really pan out that way. The agencies didn't give them a full set of authorities. 2014, Congress passed Federal Information Technology Reform Act to really emphasize CIOs having these authorities. They still don't have them completely across government. This would be an important issue as well.
Okay, well, that is very helpful feedback, and it brings me to my next concern, which is really a follow-up on what you just said on cybersecurity and CDM programs, too. So cybersecurity has been on the high-risk list for 24 years, and over the past 2 years, the leadership commitment in this area has declined. This is disturbing, especially, of course, in light of the SolarWinds attack, and I look forward to working with the Biden-Harris administration and all of my congressional colleagues to ensure that we have the necessary leadership in place to coordinate federal cybersecurity efforts to anticipate and prevent these attacks. Along those lines, this year's report also shows how federal agencies struggle to implement programs to monitor and address cybersecurity risks. These programs include the Department of Homeland Security's Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program. What obstacles are preventing agencies from fully implementing these types of monitoring programs, and how can Congress help agencies overcome these obstacles? And then after you answer that, I have one more question, so
Sure.
if we can be fairly brief here. that would be
Okay,
great.
well, I'll ask Nick Marinas, who's our cybersecurity expert, to respond to your question. He's younger, he'll be briefer than me.
Well, that, I would appreciate that very much. Not the briefer part, but just getting fully up to speed on what we need to do.
Sure.
And so my last question is.
Well, no,
about-
he's here, he's on.
is he
yeah.
on the, okay.
Yeah, Nick, could you please?
Yeah, yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, just talk up a little more.
There we go.
Sure, will do. So Senator, I think to be very brief on this, CDM is a government-wide initiative that CISA has put out there, and it has several others. And the reality is that for these things to be successful, it requires agencies to be best positioned to actually leverage the skill, the capabilities that DHS is providing. So in many cases, we've seen challenges from agencies in using some of these tools because they themselves don't have a good accounting of what's connected to their environments. So in other words, you can't protect what you don't know is on your network. So we need to see improvements not only from federal agencies, but also DHS in providing them assistance to get better at that.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and glad you're here. So now my third question. Mr. Dodaro, as part of the year-end COVID-19 relief package, Senator Collins and I negotiated $10 billion in flexible funding for the United States Postal Service. That money was intended to assist the Postal Service in addressing its immediate financial hardship while upholding service standards expected by the American people. As the high-risk list notes, even with this funding to cover its operating costs, the Postal Service anticipates that it still won't be able to meet its required payments under its current business model. In your view, what statutory reforms to the current business model are required to bring the Postal Service back from the brink of insolvency without sacrificing service?
I think there needs to be a clear agreement between the Congress and the Postal Service that's immutable about what service is expected to be provided.
Yeah.
And then to figure out how to pay for it. And I'm not sure the current business model that relies on first-class mail is a sustainable model on how to pay for that over time. And while the Postal Service may be able to deal at the margins with that, I'm not sure that they're going to be able to operate like a business, if you will, which has been the expectation, and finance that level of service. And, you know, the federal government provides support and carries out functions that aren't viable functions for the private sector. And unfortunately, the postal operations is sort of moving in that direction, and has been slowly for years and been precipitated even more by the global financial crisis, now by the pandemic. And with the advent of technology and generational changes that are coming with expectations of younger people dealing not with paper mail, I don't think the prospects are there that the Postal Service by itself is going to be able to generate the revenue necessary to meet the Congress's expectation for services. So some other arrangement for financing and governance needs to be struck, in my opinion.
Okay, well, thank you for that feedback as well. And again, thank you and your entire team for its excellent work, and congratulations on 100 years.
Well, thank you for the recognition you plan to give us.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Senator.